The first sound to cut through the Grand Council chamber wasn't a greeting. It was the flat, decisive thunk of a severed trophy hitting the polished obsidian floor. It rolled in an ugly half-circle before coming to rest at the feet of General Verkle, still glistening from the kill. The head, scaled, jaw slack, eyes glassed over, had belonged to the last species arrogant enough to resist the dominion. Around the circular table, alien dignitaries shifted in their thrones, some in satisfaction, others in quiet fear. Verkle didn't care about the subtleties. He wanted the smell of conquest to hang in the air like burned oil. Cowards, he said, voice a grinding rasp that needed no amplification. This will be humanity's fate unless they kneel. The council murmured, some in clipped consonants, some in liquid clicks. A few leaned forward to study the human dossier projected in the air, a sphere of blue and green, dotted with sprawling cities. Primitive architecture, chaotic governance, a military small enough to be mocked in the corridors. They had all agreed Earth would bend in days. What amused Verkle most was that the humans had accepted his invitation for peace negotiations with insulting haste. The surrender was a formality. They send only two. Ambassador Trell of the Zeloth Confederacy let her mandibles open wide in a laugh that rattled the ceiling beams. No fleet, no honor guard. Two bipedal mammals, soft-skinned, fragile-boned. The prey walks into the predator's den. Verkle's eye ridges lowered, casting his gaze over the council. Make ready the reception hall. I want them welcomed with every formality. Let them see our size, our strength, our inevitability. He didn't add what was in his mind, that when they left the hall, they would already be breathing air measured in hours. The docking bay was a cathedral of steel, columns reaching into shadow. The hiss of atmospheric equalization echoed like a giant drawing breath. Dozens of Dominion honor guards stood in double ranks, armor polished, until it reflected the bay's amber light. They carried ceremonial pikes tipped with vibroblades, not for use, but for message. Above them loomed banners stitched with battle scenes, each a history lesson in who had fallen before. The human shuttle was laughably small, its hull marred with heat, scoring from a rough jump into the Dominion sector. It touched down without ceremony, hatches remaining closed for several long breaths. Then the ramp descended in a measured, hydraulic sigh. Two figures emerged. The first was a man in a plain, charcoal gray suit. No armor, no insignia. His hair was cut short, his jaw clean-shaven, his gait unhurried. His eyes, dark, steady, moved like they were mapping exits, counting guards, memorizing choke points. His name, offered in the dossier, was Colt Maddox. Verkle remembered the translation note. Colt, type of projectile weapon. The second was a woman, her coat black wool, long enough to brush her knees, hands gloved in soft leather. She carried herself like someone unconcerned with 100 sets of alien eyes following her every step. A warm smile curved her lips, but her gaze was unreadable, like glass over a furnace. Ilya Morozova. A name Verkle thought sounded like a song until he read her file, the little that wasn't redacted. No weapons hung at their hips. No guards followed them. Yet the air shifted around them as if something had entered that did not belong to the category of prey. Verkle strode forward, flanked by his tallest captains. Human representatives, he said, letting the contempt drip. Your people must value their leaders little, to send only two into the seat of our power. Colt's reply was mild, almost courteous. We didn't want to waste anyone's time, General. The woman tilted her head, her smile widening just enough to show teeth. Besides, we only needed 2 seats. A ripple went through the honor guard. Confusion, not laughter. Verkle's mandibles clicked once, an involuntary tick. He gestured for them to follow. The council chamber was a hollow sphere of black stone, ringed with high-backed thrones. Alien races from 100 systems watched the humans take their place at the center dais. A servant poured a deep green liquid into crystalline cups before them, but Colt raised a hand. Coffee, he said. Coffee. Trell echoed the word like tasting something sour. A drink, Ilya offered. Bitter, hot, addictive. Like some conversations. The aliens didn't laugh. Colt took the offered liquid instead, sipped it without grimace. Verkle opened the formalities with a list of demands: cessation of all space travel beyond the Sol system, surrender of military fleets, tribute in resources. He expected resistance, posturing, negotiation. He got silence. Colt listened as though hearing a weather report, his gaze drifting to the vaulted ceiling. Ilya tapped one gloved finger lightly against the cup, her eyes roving over the chamber's support columns as if admiring the craftsmanship. Finally, Colt said, "Your terms are clear." He glanced at Ilya. "They are," she agreed. "And yet we came to talk." Trell made a noise halfway between a hiss and a scoff. "Talk. You will sign the treaty, or your oceans will boil." Ilya leaned forward slightly. "Have you ever boiled a lobster, Ambassador? It tries to climb out of the pot. You have to push it back down. Again, and again, and again." She smiled sweetly. "Humans don't like being pushed down." The room cooled by degrees. Verkle tapped the arm of his throne. "Enough. You will be shown to quarters. We reconvene at dawn for signatures." They rose without protest. The alien guards fell into step behind them, but found the pace oddly hard to match. Not rushed, not slow, just deliberate. Hours later, a security officer reported a minor anomaly. The humans were in their quarters, but no one had seen them enter. The footage from the last 5 minutes of the corridor looped cleanly. No sign of tampering. The guards were certain they'd been at their post the whole time. The officer brought it to Verkle, who studied the still image on the screen. 2 humans, mid-step, eyes caught by the lens. Colt's mouth was tilted in the faintest suggestion of a smile. Ilya's eyes looked directly into the camera. For the first time that day, Verkle felt the deep, unshakable instinct of a predator realizing the hunt might be mutual. The tour began with a scream. Not from the humans, never from them, but from somewhere deep in the engineering decks, where a coolant line had ruptured and flash-frozen 2 technicians before anyone could seal the breach. The ship's alert chimes still echoed through the corridors as Sarek, the young liaison officer assigned to entertain the guests, fumbled his greeting. He hadn't wanted this assignment. He'd drawn it after losing a game of chance in the mess hall the night before. Now flanked by Colt Maddox and Ilya Morozova, he wished fervently that someone else was here to walk these impossible creatures through the Dominion's crown jewel. Colt's voice was level, almost gentle. "Bad morning for your engineers." "It happens," Sarek said too quickly. He adjusted the strap of his ceremonial sash. "We will start with navigation control." "Sure," Colt replied, and it was the kind of sure that made Sarek feel like he'd already failed a test he didn't know was being given. They moved through wide corridors lined with hollow panels and crew bustling in tight formations. Ilya kept pace on Sarek's left, her gloved hands clasped lightly behind her back. She asked questions in a tone that was warm and curious, but each one landed like a probe in a sensitive joint. The redundancy in their FTL drives, the size of their crew complement, the intervals of their shield recalibration. Sarek answered with what protocol allowed, though he suspected she could smell the omissions. In navigation control, the air was cool and dry, the walls lit with faint starfield projections. The lead navigator, a massive, triple-jointed Korash, straightened in surprise as the humans entered. Colt's gaze swept the room once, then lingered on the central plot table, a layered projection of the Dominion's occupied sectors. "Impressive," he said, and something in the way he said it made the Korash look away. Sarek launched into his scripted description of their jump capabilities, but Ilya drifted toward a side console. Her attention appeared casual, but Sarek noticed her eyes flicker over shield harmonic readouts and drive core sync ratios. When she returned to stand beside Colt, he didn't look at her, but his thumb brushed against his cuff once, a signal, maybe, or a private acknowledgement. From navigation, they moved to the mess hall. Alien crew paused mid-bite to watch the newcomers. The air was thick with the scent of steamed Thilra grain and roasted kelp. Sarek, determined to maintain some control, offered them a selection from the buffet. Colt chose something coiled and still faintly twitching, cut into it with an easy efficiency, and ate without comment. Ilya asked for bread, got a dense, salty slab, and ate it like it was a delicacy. "What do humans usually eat?" asked a bold ensign from the next table. "Steak," Colt said, chewing. "Big slabs of muscle from herd animals. We like to sear them over open fire. Sometimes we eat them rare, still bleeding." The ensign's frills went rigid. Ilya smiled, as if sharing a harmless joke. "It's about the flavor, not the violence," she said. "Though sometimes it's about both." Sarek moved them along quickly. In the weapons bay, a line of plasma cannons gleamed under inspection lights. The chief gunner, eager to display his prize, showed them the largest, a barrel that could vaporize a city block in one pulse. Colt ran his hand along the smooth metal, his expression unreadable. "Back home," he murmured, "we'd mount this on a fishing boat for fun." The gunner barked something in disbelief, but Colt had already moved on, studying the control linkages like a mechanic at a car show. Ilya asked about maintenance cycles, nodding as though learning a recipe. Their next stop was the training deck, where two Dominion warriors in lacquered armor were sparring with shot pikes. The strikes crackled, each blow loud enough to make the deck plates ring. Ilya watched for a full minute, her head tilted. Then she asked, "May I try?" The instructor, amused, handed her a practice pike, clearly expecting a clumsy display. She stepped into the ring, twirled the weapon once, and faced the larger warrior. Her first move was almost too fast to see. 3 precise strikes, a sweep of the leg, and the warrior hit the floor, weapon spinning away. She offered him a gloved hand up, her apology soft, and somehow more humiliating than the defeat. When they left the deck, the murmurs followed them. Sarek could feel the crew's eyes on their backs. Minor reports began trickling into Verkel's security net. Sealed hatches found open without a code log. Surveillance feeds with a missing 30 seconds here, a looped minute there. Nothing that rose to an actionable threat, but every incident occurred within meters of where the humans had been. At the diplomatic dinner that evening, Ilya complimented the head chef on the complexity of the menu, then, apparently by accident, described in detail how quickly a crew this size would starve if hydroponics failed. She offered it like culinary trivia, smiling over her wine. Colt told a story about hunting deer in the mountains of Colorado. He described lying in the snow for 3 days without moving more than a finger, waiting for the perfect shot. Patience, he concluded, is the only real weapon. The aliens chuckled politely, though more than one avoided his gaze. By the time Sarek escorted them toward their quarters, his nerves were taut. They walked side by side, speaking little, yet every turn of their heads seemed deliberate, every glance cataloging something unseen. When they reached the door, Colt paused. "Good tour," he said. "Very informative," Ilya added, and Sarek had the odd sensation she was speaking about something other than the ship. Hours later, 2 maintenance drones recorded an anomaly, a tiny fluctuation in the power conduits leading to the ship's central reactor. The data vanished from the log within seconds, erased without trace. In the shadows of a quiet service corridor, Colt and Ilya stood close, their voices low. "Phase 1's done," Colt said. "They still think we're the show ponies," Ilya replied. "Perfect." Neither noticed, or perhaps they did, the small, insect-sized sensor in the wall grill, its recording light blinking red before going dark, as though it had seen enough to stop watching. The boom rattled the teeth of everyone aboard the Iron Crown. No alarms this time, just the raw, concussive slap of atmosphere hammering metal. Verkel's command deck erupted in movement, officers shouting sector coordinates, data streams flaring across the holomap. The blast hadn't breached the hull, but something in the ship's outer weapon ring had just died a sudden, ugly death. In the confusion, Colt Maddox and Ilya Morozova stepped into the observation lounge as if arriving for a scheduled appointment, both carrying cups of the bitter Dominion tea they pretended to enjoy. Verkel caught their entrance, his mandibles tightening. "Your presence here," he said without greeting, "is becoming an inconvenience." Colt sipped, unbothered. "So is your weapons array." The general's knuckles whitened around the edge of the tactical rail. "A coincidence," he spat. "But it will not happen again." Ilya's voice was polite, even sympathetic. "No, I imagine not. You seem like a careful man, General." Her eyes swept the viewport, where the stars turned slowly against the black. Still, even careful men misplace things. They let that hang, then allowed themselves to be escorted to the council chamber for what Verkle framed as a public exercise in mutual understanding. The truth, thinly veiled, was a staged humiliation. The floor of the chamber had been cleared to make room for a mock combat demonstration. 2 Dominion champions, already armed and armored in gleaming plates, shock glaives in hand. Verkle's voice boomed across the chamber. Humans will learn today what strength looks like. Colt took one look at the weapons and shook his head. We don't do exhibitions. His tone was almost apologetic. We only play for keeps. Ilya stepped forward. I'll indulge you. She accepted the lighter of the 2 glaives, tested the weight with a single turn of her wrist. The Dominion warrior across from her grinned, confident in size and reach. It lasted 8 seconds. She stepped into the first lunge, let it pass, pivoted, and dropped him to the floor with a sweeping strike to the back of the knee. The glaive's tip poised an inch from the vulnerable joint at his throat. She withdrew before contact, murmured something too low for the mics to catch, and helped him up. The silence from the crowd was heavier than applause. That silence followed them out, down the corridor, into the glare of the security grid. Somewhere in the Dominion's upper echelons, an analyst finally pulled the right threads in the human files. The first report arrived in Verkle's hands an hour later. Colt Maddox, classified ghost asset for the Terran Strategic Command, credited with operations that toppled 2 regimes without a single confirmed photograph in the last decade. Ilya Morozova, former Spetsnaz, disappeared from public record after an assassination in the Virex system left 3 warlords dead and 1 fleet leader missing. Both names, when spoken in certain black markets and border garrisons, drew the same whispered phrase, American Boogeyman and Baba Yaga. Verkle read the report twice. Then he summoned Security Chief Harex. Double their surveillance. If they breathe out of rhythm, I want to know. The next day, Colt strolled into a tactical planning room uninvited. Officers froze mid-sentence. He glanced over the projected defense grid, nodded appreciatively. Not bad, he said, but you've got a blind arc here, here, and here. He marked 3 points with the casual certainty of someone explaining a chess move. If I were you, I'd move these units in closer, consolidate your power lines, makes you look stronger. Hours later, Harex realized that following Colt's advice would have left the entire portside defense net exposed to an inside attack. By then, the human was gone, sitting in the mess hall teaching Sarek how to play a card game called poker. Ilya's incursions were subtler. She visited the kitchens again, offering to share human recipes. The first called for an herb infusion that could only be achieved by dismantling the vent filters. For the aroma, she explained sweetly, hands demonstrating the exact sequence that would give her access to the ducts feeding straight into life support. The Dominion's unease thickened like smoke. Crew members who had once whispered mockery in the halls now fell silent when the humans passed. Even Sarek, whose curiosity had survived 2 days of proximity, found himself glancing over his shoulder when walking alone. Verkle decided to strip away the veil. In the council chamber, before the eyes of allies and subordinates, he leaned forward. Your presence here has yielded nothing but disruption. Are you here to sabotage this ship, human? Colt's answer was a slow exhale. General, if we were sabotaging you, you wouldn't be here to accuse us. The chamber fell into a stillness so deep that the ambient hum of the life support system became painfully loud. Trell's mandibles clicked once, involuntarily. After that, Verkle stopped trying to hide his distrust. Guards followed the humans in visible numbers. Meetings were shifted to secure compartments. And yet, systems still hiccuped. A power relay tripped in auxiliary command. The targeting sensors for 2 broadside cannons reset to factory defaults. A data vault door cycled open and closed 3 times with no record of override. Late that cycle, Sarek caught Ilya alone in one of the ship's hanging gardens, a rare patch of greenery maintained for morale. You're scaring them, he said, voice barely above a whisper. She glanced up from the alien herb she was studying, one brow raised. The wrong people. The ones you can't see, he said. The ones who could make you disappear between breaths. That's the idea, she replied. and the way she said it made him feel like he'd stepped into a shadow he could never step out of. When Colt and Ilya requested a tour of the central engineering decks to understand Dominion technology better, Verkal approved it with the cold satisfaction of a man laying a trap. He posted 4 armed guards to escort them and ordered every sensor in the sector to record. They moved through the colossal reactor chamber like polite tourists, commenting on the elegance of the shielding, the efficiency of the coolant feeds. Colt asked about the redundancy cycles. Ilya lingered near the primary control nexus, noting the glow of status lights, the hum of power transmission. On the way out, Colt paused beside a bulkhead panel, leaned a shoulder casually against it while adjusting his cuff. It was nothing, a man shifting his weight. The guard saw nothing unusual. When the humans were gone, the recording feed from that panel showed a flicker, just one frame out of sync. The frame contained a faint blue blink at waist level before the image righted itself. The monitoring tech flagged it for review. That night, Verkal stood alone in the command gallery, watching the ship's course through the star lanes. The humans were in their quarters, under watch. Every system was green, and yet he couldn't shake the gnawing sense that some part of the ship now belonged to them, claimed without force, without announcement. In the dark, far below his feet, deep in the heart of the Iron Crown, something small and silent waited for a signal that had not yet come. The Iron Crown's night cycle was a thing of engineered beauty. Lights dimmed in steady gradients. Air recyclers shifted to a lower hum. The vast corridors softened into half-shadow. For most of the crew, it was the one time their immense warship felt almost safe, almost quiet. For Verkal, it was when his instincts screamed the loudest. The humans had been on his ship for 4 days, and in that time, nothing catastrophic had happened. Yet every system report carried hairline fractures, power dips of a fraction of a second, camera feeds that dropped 3 frames, maintenance droids that returned from a routine check with unregistered firmware. Little things. The kind of things that never mattered until they mattered all at once. He was reviewing the latest logs in the command gallery when the deck tremored. Not a blast, not a collision, just a pulse, as if something deep in the ship had flexed. His captains reported nothing unusual. Still, he couldn't shake the image that it had been the ship exhaling under someone else's control. Elsewhere, Colt Maddox was sitting at the small table in their assigned quarters, rolling an ancient-looking coin over his knuckles. Across from him, Ilya Morozova leaned back against the wall, her boots planted apart, eyes closed as if napping. They'd barely spoken in the last hour, letting the ship's own noises speak to them. The faint whir of a lift stopping 2 decks down. The short-lived hiss of a pressure door opening in the maintenance spine. The muted scrape of a guard shifting position outside their door. Colt caught the coin in his palm. You feel that? Ilya opened one eye. The pulse? Yeah. He glanced at the chrono on his wrist. Right on schedule. They both stood, slow and unhurried. From the overhead vent, a tiny click sounded. A sound too soft for alien ears, but one they trained to hear. Colt moved to the door. We're on. The 2 guards outside barely had time to register the door opening before Colt stepped past them, his badge from the council session in hand. General Verkal wants us on the command deck. Now. It was the calm certainty in his voice, not the badge, that made them move without checking orders. Ilya fell into step beside him, her gloved fingers brushing the seam of the wall as they walked, counting paces. They weren't heading for the command deck. They were headed for the core spine of the ship, where every conduit and control line crossed. In the engineering bay, Chief Technician Relvar was bent over a diagnostics panel when the first anomaly hit, a complete wipe of the control queue. The lights on the board danced, reloaded, then froze with every output locked to standby. What in the... His voice cut short as his calm implant shrieked feedback into his skull. Around him, the tech crew cursed in a dozen languages, trying to re-establish control. By the time Verkal's call reached engineering, the humans were already at the reactor level. The bulkhead guards, 2 veterans of the L3 sieges, stepped forward, pikes angled. Restricted area, 1 barked. Colt didn't slow. Good. Means we're in the right place. The taller guard moved to block him, But Ilya stepped into his space with the grace of a shadow and tapped the haft of his pike with 2 fingers. "Careful," she said softly. "You might not like how this ends." She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten, just left the words there, hanging like frost. The guards hesitated. That was enough. Colt palmed the panel, and it opened for him. Not because he had the clearance, but because clearance didn't matter anymore. Inside, the reactor chamber glowed in its deep heart, the core's blue-white light pulsing like a captive star. It was a marvel of Dominion engineering, self-stabilizing, shielded against all but the most catastrophic failure. Colt approached it like a man approaching a campfire, familiar and unimpressed. He reached into his coat and drew out a slim, silver cylinder, no bigger than a stylus. Ilya's eyes tracked the gantries above, where surveillance drones hung inert. "We're clear." He clicked the device once. It vanished, not visually, but from every sensor within the room. Invisible to the ship. Still humming in his hand. He knelt at the base of the reactor's main distribution node and pressed it into place. On the command deck, Verkel's comm board lit with simultaneous red alerts. Reactor control breach, shield matrix error, weapons array cycling offline. His captains scrambled for answers, voices overlapping. He barked for eyes on the humans. The feed came up grainy, distorted, and showed them standing in the core, doing exactly what he feared. Seal the reactor level. Verkel roared. The order was never completed. Across the Iron Crown, every door on the reactor's level slammed shut, except the ones Colt and Ilya needed. The device in the core had turned the ship's own security into an obedient pet. Colt tapped his comm bead. "Maddox to side leader. Package is wrapped." The reply came in a burst of static, then a voice like steel over gravel. "Copy that. On your mark." In the black outside the ship, human warships shifted from the long shadows of asteroid cover, their drives still cold. They'd been there the entire time, waiting in silent formation, hidden from Dominion sensors by the very interference the humans had been seeding since they arrived. Verkel's second-in-command, a seasoned tactician, leaned close. "General, they've been inside our systems for days. This is an execution, not a negotiation." Verkel slammed a clawed hand into the console, cracking the edge. "Then we cut them down now." He triggered the ship's internal defense drones. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then every drone in the corridor outside reactor level pivoted toward the bulkhead guards and stunned them into twitching collapse. Colt and Ilya walked out untouched. Over comms, Verkel's fleet captains were shouting, shields dropping without command, weapon targeting recalibrating to point at their own escort craft, drives cycling into forced idle. Verkel watched his fleet, his pride, his legacy, turn into a row of helpless prey animals in the crosshairs. "Why?" he demanded over the ship's wideband, broadcasting into the reactor level, the corridors, anywhere the humans could hear. "Why come with no army, no fleet, just the 2 of you?" Colt's voice came back, steady and low. "Because an army would have been a waste of time. We only needed the 2 seats, remember?" Ilya's voice followed, warm and measured. "You invited us into your heart, General. We just took the invitation seriously." Outside, the first human ships lit their drives, sliding into perfect strike positions. No bluster. No open comm challenge. Just the quiet confidence of predators who had already eaten. Verkel tried to initiate an emergency jump, but the NAV console returned a single word in Dominion glyphs. Denied. He understood then. Their device in the core wasn't just a kill switch. It was a leash, and they were holding it. The first volley didn't even hit a Dominion hull. Instead, it sheared the engines off a fleeing escort, letting it drift. A warning shot. Colt and Ilya stepped onto the command deck without resistance, the guards already incapacitated. Verkel turned to face them, claws flexed, his massive frame a wall of rage. "You think you can threaten the Dominion into submission with tricks?" Colt stopped 3 paces away. "Not threaten. Demonstrate." "Demonstrate what?" Verkel snarled. "That you're not the only hunters in this galaxy," Colt said, voice quiet but caring. "And that you made the mistake every predator makes sooner or later. You underestimated something smaller than you." Ilya circled toward the tactical display, her gloved hand brushing the edge of the console. "And now," she said softly, "you get to live long enough to tell others not to make the same mistake." Verkel's mandibles clicked once, twice. "If you wanted me dead." "We don't," Colt cut in. "Dead men don't talk." "You're going to talk, General. You're going to tell every system you've conquered that when you call humans cowards, you should remember this day." Outside, human strike craft moved like blades through water, disabling but not destroying, herding the Dominion fleet into a tight, defenseless cluster. The precision was surgical, almost merciful, if mercy could wear a smile like that. Verkel's calm officer turned in her chair, her voice tight. "General, the fleet is signaling unconditional retreat. They are afraid." The word hit harder than any blow. The Dominion did not fear, but they feared now. Colt glanced once toward the viewport, then back to Verkel. "Two's plenty." Ilya straightened from the console, eyes meeting Verkel's without a flicker. "Pray you never meet the ones we left at home." They turned and walked out, leaving the command deck in a silence so total it felt physical. In the void beyond, the human fleet peeled away, their prey already broken. The Iron Crown drifted, its systems slowly returning to Dominion control, but never fully. Somewhere deep in its heart, the small silver device still pulsed, waiting for a voice that could call it to life again. And in the far reaches of Verkel's mind, a truth coiled tighter than fear. The humans had come not to fight, but to measure, and they had measured him wanting.